And welcome back to Backspace Academy. In this hands-on lecture on creating a custom AMI, we're going to be creating a Node.js server from scratch using the EC2 service. So we're not going to be using a pre-baked AMI. So before we use the Backspace Node.js AMI, we're going to be making this from scratch. So we're going to launch an EC2 Amazon Linux instance. And then we're going to put the software that we need on that instance, and then we're going to create an AMI from that instance, and then we'll use that AMI to launch another Node.js server. And then we'll also look at copying this AMI over to another region. So I'm just in the EC2 management console. I'm just going to quickly launch an instance using the Amazon Linux AMI, and that will be a T2 micro instance. And I need to make sure that we have a public IP address assigned to this instance. We'll leave storage and tags as they are, but we need to create a new security group. So I'm just going to call it test, and I'll just leave the description as it is there. That's fine. So we need to have SSH access, obviously, to connect in and operate our instance. So we'll leave that as it is, but we also need to have access from the wider internet to come in because it is a web server that we're creating, a Node.js web server. So we need to have HTTP access on port 80, and that's for everything to come in. So now that we've got those two rules set up, we can review and launch, and then launch our instance. We'll use a key pair that we've already got. If not, we'll create one. So we'll just launch that instance. Now, once our instance is up and running, I'm just going to get the connection command that I need. So just click on connect after we've selected that instance. And I'm just going to copy the connection command here and use that in a terminal screen to connect into this instance. Okay, so I've just opened a terminal screen and I've navigated to the location of my key pairs that I'm using to connect into this EC2 instance. So I'm just going to paste in that connection string and hopefully connect in. And there we are, I've connected in. So the first thing I want to do with this Linux instance is to update it. So sudo yum update and -y just to say yes all the time. So after a certain amount of time, we're going to have our yum update completed. Now, the first thing we need to do is that we need to set up our Linux firewall settings. Now, being a Node.js server, it will be expecting, or the way that we've set up our Node.js sample app is it will be expecting traffic to come in on 8080. But our web traffic will be coming in on port 80. So what we need to do is we need to set up IP forwarding from port 80, the traffic coming in, and forward that on to Node.js through the Linux operating system to port 8080. And then we need to enable port 80 access in our firewall settings. So the first thing we need to do is set up IP forwarding. And we use that command there, and that's the same command that we used in the previous lesson on creating a Node.js environment. So just go back to the notes there and you'll have that in those notes. And then accept traffic inbound on our port 80. And again, there we put that in on our output. So there is our instance is now set up in the Linux operating system to accept traffic on port 80. It will redirect that traffic across to port 8080 to enable Node.js to receive that traffic. Now, the next thing we're going to do is that we're going to install Node.js, the latest version of Node.js, on this instance. Now, I've provided a link in this to the Amazon documentation that will explain how to go through and do this. So if you just go to the resources section and just click on that link, it'll link to the JavaScript SDK documentation on Node.js. That will have that section on how to do this. So I'm just going to paste it all in there. So first we do a curl, and that is to install NVM, or the Node Version Manager, and that is what has happened there. The next thing we need to do is to activate that Node Version Manager, which we've done there. And once we've done that, we can now install Node, and the latest version currently is 8 at the time of this video is being done. So we're going to install Node.js version 8. And there it is. So if we do node --version, it will tell us that we've just installed version 8.2.1, which is the latest version out there that we can use for Node.js. Now the next thing we need to install is Express so that we can create web pages. So we'll do npm install Express, and we'll do that globally. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to need to install Git. So I'll put Git on there as well. So we'll just do a yum install Git. And we'll just check that that's working. So do git --version. And we can see we've got 2.7.5 set up there. So that's fine. So now that we've got Git set up, what we're going to do is we're going to pull in the sample code that we've got on the Backspace Academy side, or on the Backspace Technology GitHub account. And so we do a git clone, and the address is github.com/backspacetech, and then /node-js-sample.git. So if you type that in, that will clone that sample application. And if we just do a dir, and we can have a look and we'll see that it is. So there's our node-js-sample application that has just been pulled in from that GitHub repository. So I'm just now going to cd into that directory, and we'll just have a look inside of it. So the first thing I need to do now is install the packages that are needed for the application. So we just do npm install, and that will pull in those npm packages that we need that are defined in our package.json file. So now we can run our application. So you can just do npm start if you want, or if you want to see it in a debug output as well, just put in this command there. Otherwise you can just do npm start. It'll both do the same thing. And we can see there it's listing on port 8080. So Node.js, it'll now be listing on port 8080, but the Linux operating system will be accepting traffic on port 80. And we've also set up our security group to accept traffic on port 80 as well. So we should be able to now go to the public IP address of this instance, and we should be able to see our sample application running. Okay, so back in the EC2 Management Console, I'm just going to select that instance, and I'm just going to select its public IP address and go to its public IP address. And there we go. We've got our sample application up and running. So we've successfully launched an instance. We've set up a security group that is going to accept traffic on port 80. And we've also set up our Linux instance with its firewall settings to redirect traffic from port 80 to port 8080. And also we have our Node.js instance that is accepting that traffic and responding to that traffic as well. And so there we have it. So what we'll do next is that we'll go back into the EC2 Management Console and we'll create an AMI of this EC2 instance. Now back in the EC2 Management Console, we just have to again select that instance, go to Actions, and then we go to Image, and we can create an image of that. We'll give it a name. Okay, so once we've put that in there, we just create the image now. Okay, so create image request received. So we can click on the pending image. So we just go on here. Okay, so after a certain amount of time, our AMI will have been created and it'll have status available. So what we can do if we go into permissions, so currently by default when we first create an AMI, it's going to be private. And so we can actually edit that. And so we can change it to public. So if we change it to public and we save that, it will then be available to be searched for on the community AMIs. So I'm just going to leave it private because I don't want to put another AMI out there and get people confused when they're looking for the Backspace Node.js AMI. But if you wanted to create an application and you wanted to put that AMI out for the rest of the AWS community to use, then that's how you would do it. You would just make it a public AMI and it will be on there. So I'm just going to cancel out of that. So what I'm going to look at doing now is to copy this AMI over to another region. So I'm currently in North Virginia, and let's just say I want to copy it over to, say, Mumbai. Why not? So what I do is I go to Actions, Copy AMI, and I select my destination region, Mumbai. There we go. And we have an option to encrypt it. I'm not going to worry about that. And so I copy the AMI over to Mumbai. So again, it comes up with a screen saying that this operation is currently in progress. So we can visit the AMI in AP South 1, which is the Mumbai region. So let's have a look at that and see what's happening. And there we can see it's going through the same thing. It's going to be creating, it'll be pending, and then eventually go to available. Okay, so after a bit longer amount of time to doing it in the US East region, to do a cross-region copy tends to take a little bit longer. But we have our AMI that was in the US East region has now been copied over to the Mumbai region. So if you want to create multiple instances in multiple regions that are identical, then this is how you do it. You create an AMI and then you copy that AMI over to the region that you want to launch into. So we can, again, now that that's created, we can launch an instance from here, just the same as we will before. So I'm not going to go through that process now, simply because I haven't got a key pair set up for connecting in. But all you would need to do is to go through and launch that instance. Again, make sure it's got a public IP address. Launch that instance and make sure that you've got a security group that'll have access on port 22 and on port 80. And then once that's up and running, you can connect into it. You can again set up your IP forwarding in your Linux operating system and set up your firewall settings in your Linux operating system to allow traffic on port 80. And then you will be able to run that application, and you'll be able to go to the IP address of that EC2 instance and you'll see the application running. So that brings us to the end of this lecture. So you now have a very good understanding of not only how to launch instances using AMI, but also to launch an instance with a bare bones Linux operating system and then go through and install software and create an AMI of that finished EC2 instance, then copy that over to multiple regions and launch EC2 instances that are the same in multiple regions if you like. So that brings us to the end, and I look forward to you in the next lecture.